We'll continue with my college football schedule preview and point spread prediction videos. Today I'll be doing the Penn State Nittany Lions. So this is a very easy schedule for Penn State. I think that it is a little bit tougher than last year's schedule because they play Oregon, but the non-conference schedule could not get any easier. They get three easy wins against Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. And it's even better that they get them to start the season because then if Penn State does have any issues with the team that they need to work on, they'll be able to do it without being in any danger of losing. Now they do have a tough start to the conference schedule with Oregon, who I think is going to be a good team. They do get a bye week before it, but it's not really needed because the Villanova will probably be the easiest game on Penn State's schedule. They're an FCS team. So James Franklin's problems have really just been against great teams, not just good teams. And I think there's a difference between a great football team and a good football team. Like Illinois last year was a good football team, and Penn State beat them, and SMU was a good football team, and I think Boise State was a good football team. And while Oregon's roster was loaded last year with talent, Oregon I think was only great because they had Dylan Gabriel, and if Oregon hadn't have had Dylan Gabriel, I don't think they would have won the Big Ten championship against Penn State. Because Penn State scored 37 points in that game. And now that Oregon is losing Dylan Gabriel, I'm not convinced that they're going to be a great team. And I would, especially with it being at Penn State, give Penn State a good chance to win this game. And Penn State's uh, other tough games will be against Ohio State and Indiana. The games against UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, Michigan State, Nebraska, and Rutgers. It's hard for me to imagine Penn State losing any of those games because James Franklin, even though he has a problem with being able to win the big games, he doesn't have a problem that a lot of other good coaches that can win the big games have, which is losing to teams that are bad or average. He's not lost to any average or bad teams in the last 3 years. All of his losses have been to really good teams. And at UCLA and uh, Michigan State and Nebraska and Rutgers, I think we'll probably all be okay. But Nebraska is the only one of them that I see having a chance to be good because Matt Rule is slowly rebuilding Nebraska's football program, but because it's happening slowly, I can't see Nebraska having much of a chance to win that game against Penn State. But Northwestern should be a very easy win for Penn State because Northwestern last year, after having a surprisingly good year in 2023, went back to their normal of being terrible and either last or near last in the Big Ten. And they switched the eight on their record from wins to losses. And Northwestern has this thing where they'll have a good year and then have so many bad years in a row. And because they had their good year recently, that probably means that they're going to be terrible again this year. And Iowa offense did improve a lot last year, but it was really just because of one player, the running back, Caleb Johnson. And now that he's gone to the NFL, unless Iowa can have another player like him come out of nowhere, I think their offense is going to be more like it was in 2023, where it's non-existent. And I know Iowa's defense has been their strength for the last several years, but they lose so much on that side of the ball too. So that's why it's hard for me to believe that Iowa could be very competitive with Penn State right now. But it's nice that uh, Penn State gets a bye week before the Ohio State game because this is going to be the biggest game, I think, on their schedule. So to me, if Penn State can't beat Ohio State this year, James Franklin is never going to beat Ohio State again because Ohio State lost it so much on defense, and Penn State has a lot more coming back than Ohio State does this year. And Ohio State's defense has been the problem for Penn State the last couple of years. Penn State can't score on them. And Penn State has been doing uh, now what Ohio State did last year, which is getting so many of their players to come back for another year instead of going to the NFL. And Penn State even hired Ohio State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles. But I am not confident that James Franklin can get done what Ryan Day did this past season, because Ryan Day is a better coach than James Franklin is. And last year, Penn State, didn't have as good of a roster as Ohio State did, or as Oregon uh, did. But the Notre Dame game, uh, Penn State had about as good of a roster, I think, as Notre Dame did, and James Franklin just got out coached. And this year, I would probably say right now that Penn State has a little bit of a roster advantage over Ohio State. Because even though Ohio State recruits a little bit better, Penn State has so much more experience on their team. But often the better coach wins, even if they don't have as good of a roster as the other coach does. And could this be the year that James Franklin finally beats Ohio State again? Maybe. But before I can pick Penn State to beat Ohio State, I will have to see them beat Ohio uh, State. So now for the point spread prediction. Games in the green are games where I think Penn State will be favored to win by a blowout, 20 or more points. Games in the blue are games where I think that Penn State will be favored to win by double digits, 10 to 19 points. And games in the purple are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a touchdown, 6 to 9 points. And games in the pink are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a field goal, 1 to 5 points. And uh, games in the yellow are games where I think that Penn State will be about a touchdown underdog, so 6 to 9 points. So here's the point spread prediction. So Nevada and FIU, I think Penn State will be favored in both of those by about 30 points. And Villanova, I think Penn State will be about a 50-point favorite in that one. In Northwestern, I think the spread in that one will be around 24 points. And UCLA and Iowa and Michigan State and Rutgers. I think the spread in all of those will be about 17 uh, points. And Iowa, because it's a road game, I'd say the spread will be like 13. And Nebraska, I think Penn State will be favored by about 14. And Oregon is a tough one. I put it in the pink because it's a home game. I think Penn State will be favored by like a point, but I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon was a small favorite or even if it was a toss up when it comes time for the game. And Indiana, the only reason it's in the purple and not in the blue is because Indiana was good last year, and I do go by how good the teams were last year, partly uh, with these point spread predictions. But I think Penn State will probably be like a 9 point favorite over Indiana, and Ohio State, because it's on the road, and Ohio State has won 8 in a row against Penn State. I think Ohio State will be favored by, I'll say, 7 points. But Penn State, to me, seems like a team that is for sure going to go back to the college football playoff. Looks to me like with this schedule, they'll either go 11-1 or 10-2. 11-1 would probably mean the loss was to Ohio State, and then 10-2 would probably mean the losses would be to Ohio State and Oregon. But that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.